All right, we're recording. Hello, Elizabeth. How are you?
Hello, Vicky. Thank you for having me on your show today.
I'm excited to have you here. Now, I know that you are a mystic nomad. Would you explain what that means to you?
Mystic Nomad came from, I have had many journeys in my life. I've been on that roller coaster ride of life, and I realized that every journey that I've made has some mysticism attached to it, whether it's been my faith, whether it's been my life, whether it's been my conviction at the time. And it just seemed to fit me, Mystic Nomad, because it's a great envelope for everything that I do. It's like my bag full of magic. So I conned the phrase Mystic Nomad, and recently I've added a new title to myself. So I'm going to have to sort of rephrase the Mystic Nomad soon.
What's your new title?
It's something that I discovered through the Akashic Records. I don't know if you're familiar with the Akashic Records.
I'm not.
Well, the Akashic Records is apparently where you can go and see what your soul purpose is. You can actually peruse like a library. And I thought, wow, what an interesting thing to do. So I perused it for about a week and I didn't get any answer, nothing, like nothing came back. And then I woke up 2 weeks later going, Cosmic Healer. And I thought, where did that come from? So Cosmic Healer is sort of where I've transitioned to. And, when I look at Mystic Nomad, it fits because mysticism and the cosmos. So I'm going to have to figure out what that new title is.
I like it.
Healer is added, yeah.
I like it. So we're on Tiny Changes, Big Shift podcast, and our topic today is forgiveness. Thank you for being willing to discuss this with me today because it's a broad topic and it covers so much. And I find that, we'll often apologize or say we're sorry, but do we really get to the deeper level of what is forgiveness? How do I ask for it? How do I give it? That kind of thing. So I think it's a timely topic right now. How would you define forgiveness for yourself?
I define forgiveness as being able to drop my judgment, my personal judgment around things, and taking on the burden of guilt. A lot of us take on that burden of guilt around a lot of things that we really don't know why we're guilty. We just feel it. And I discovered that for me, forgiveness is making room for being wrong about the way I have it.
I like that.
And so that's sort of where I've started with forgiveness. And one of the hardest things to do is actually forgive myself. Because we are our, harshest critics in life. And as you know, I really found that the most, and a lot of people have that resistance because they equate forgiveness with sacrifice, and they're not actually the same thing.
What do you think people think they're sacrificing?
Their pride, the way they look at it, the way being right, that they're the victim and everybody should apologize to them, and it's like sacrificing a part of themselves in order to, they have to give something up, like it's a lose-win game. And forgiveness is the exact opposite. There's nothing to lose.
Right. I love that.
Yeah, so I do too. And that's what started me on the journey of looking at forgiveness and the way I had it and the way I was taught it to the way I have it now.
I know that in our culture, we talk a lot about to forgive and forget. And I think that causes people to resist too. It did me. Like, I don't want to forget this wrong. Does that mean if I forgive and forget that I have to establish a relationship? I think or say something was right, that it was okay.
It's interesting you say that. Forgiveness is not wiping the slate clean. I like that. It's not wiping the slate clean. It's actually moving yourself from the situation. And the reason I got there was for the Hippopotamu Prayer, which literally you say to yourself, It's a
That's a
four-line.
Hawaiian prayer, is
It's an
it?
Hawaiian prayer. It's a four-line prayer. But what's interesting is I practiced it for a week. And the first day I was like, what? Why am I saying these words? What do they mean to me? And by the end of the week, I realized that whatever I was thinking about, I had forgiven and forgotten. So I think it's an appropriate term, but it's not without the practice behind it and understanding what it's for. You're going to be where you are or are, which is, why should I forget this situation?
So I'm hearing maybe there's levels of perceived injury that I may experience that some of them I do just forget.
Correct.
Forgive and move on, and others might be more of a struggle, but it might be because I've decided that it should stay a struggle. Would that be an accurate?
That's a better interpretation. Yes. It's how we attach the emotions to whatever injury or trauma we've received is how much we forgive or forget it, right?
Yeah.
In that perception of it. But what if we took it a little bit broader and said, if you remove your emotion, what are you remembering?
Right. The past.
The past, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're in danger of stirring up resentment and reliving that past over and over. And I think I read a Sermon on the Mount several years ago, and it had a section in there that when you don't forgive, you're chaining yourself to that experience. And it just struck me as so true.
I like that.
And I found out the person that I had the most felt had injured me the most had died, and I didn't even register that for like 5 years because it was alive for me at the same time I read that book. And it was like, all right, there's something else to do here. If somebody dies and I'm told and it doesn't even register because I want to keep this injury alive, what's that getting me?
Well, that's the other thing about forgiveness is, we are chaining ourselves to an injury that occurred or may have occurred the way we looked at it.
Yes, our perception.
Our perception, and do we have a correct perception of the situation? I ran into that actually this past week at looking at someone I've known, and her husband passed away. And I had to look at, was I going to hold on to my resentment about the situation, or was I going to be forgiving and allow my support and love to show? And it was a very interesting moment for me because I thought, you know what? I'm going to send my support, whatever it is. And of course, the return is always huge. I think a lot of people miss out the benefit of forgiving because you yourself become a better person. But secondly, you're releasing that chain that you have on yourself around the injury or trauma or whatever you think it is. And I was really shocked because when I went to the funeral, she actually came up to me and she said, she acknowledged me for what I'd said to her in previous times. And that struck me as, wow, did I have it wrong? And I'm so glad that I chose the other path with myself. I'm not always that good.
None of us are always.
But it's something I'm practicing and working on. It's letting go of that term sacrifice. I'm not sacrificing anything.
So would it be safe to say that we're protecting ourselves from sacrifice? Is that by hanging on, do you think? Or protecting ourselves? We think if we don't forgive, we'll prevent it from happening in the future? Or why do you think people might?
It's a good question. My answer is it could be both ways. I think we tend to forget that it's not about forgiving other people, that they're not involved in at all. And we tend to shift that over to, well, I get to forgive whatever person that we designated. And it's not about them, it's about us. Yeah. And so that sacrifice comes in, it's sort of we're sacrificing our dignity, we're sacrificing our pride if I forgive them. We're also elevating ourselves at the same time without actually releasing the injury. So it's like, what? And it's that backwards idea about it, because in order to forgive others, we've got to be able to forgive ourselves first so that we can extend it out, because forgiveness is an extension. It's not a hard line. I don't know how you feel about it, but that's what I'm learning about it.
Yeah. We've been in conversations together where it's to give forth, to look to the future. What do I want in this relationship? And what do you think we really want when we say we want to forgive someone?
I've never found the answer. I really haven't found the answer. Because a lot of people, it's their interpretation of it. I can only speak to myself. When I spoke about actually, I never spoke about forgiveness because I always felt that forgiveness was one of those things I hadn't reached yet. And when people speak to me about forgiveness, especially working with clients, you hear the word a lot. I tend to think that they feel it will make them feel better. It's a pacifier.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I perceive it or interpret it as a coach, because I hear it, but I don't necessarily feel that they interpret it that way. It's that, well, I can forgive them and forget, what happened, just like you said earlier, but it really isn't forgiveness. Yeah. Especially when you ask the question, can you forgive yourself? And that's when you meet all of it all at once. What do you mean forgive myself?
Yeah. You mentioned sacrifice. I know that for me in my younger years, if you hurt my feelings, I had a lot of times an overwhelming desire to retaliate. I'll pay you back. And I was passive aggressive a lot of it too. I wasn't necessarily in your face, pay you back, but so I found sometimes that gets in the way. I have to set that aside or sacrifice that. I mean, we all have the right to retaliate or not or whatever. I had to set that desire aside in order to get to the root of, okay, how do I do this? And it wasn't as hard when I didn't feel like I wanted to retaliate. Does that make sense to you?
It does, because again, I think it's that confusion with anger. We tend to we have every right to be angry. We have every right to be injured. We have every right to feel that something has happened to us. It's how we apply it, right? Yeah. A lot of women go passive aggressive because of the world we live in. And, we don't want to be called aggressive or whatever the terminology is for that week.
The B word, yeah.
The B word, thank you. The B word or witch with a capital B. But, and I found that frustrated me more, actually. That was a bigger frustration. Why can't I show that I'm angry? Why can I not show my emotions without being labeled as, well, you're a woman, or it's that time of the month, or whatever it was, when you were younger. And of course, like you, I'm very passive aggressive, and I know that, and I'm learning that it's okay to be aggressive. I don't have to be passive about it. And releasing that acknowledgement about myself, that's also a form of forgiveness. I'm forgiving myself for being aggressive. Yeah, I am. I'm sorry, I am. And that's released a lot of that passiveness or passivity about it, because it comes out authentic. It's an authentic emotion rather than me hiding it or submerging it. And I think that happens a lot in the workplace. Yes, it happens a lot in the workplace. And I was thinking about that, how it shows up for women in the workplace. We tend to not acknowledge our emotions, whether we're working mothers, whether we're stressed out, we're trying to pay bills, we're trying to be pleasant in an environment that's not necessarily pleasant, and we're excusing it instead
Yeah.
of taking it on. Now, forgiveness, and I have been thinking about that. If we were taught to forgive, not so much forget, but taught the true nature of forgiveness, would we become better women and better workers?
Yeah. I
You
think
know,
so.
I do too.
Because it's all about relationships, right?
Right.
And you would think that us as women who we say we're more relationship oriented, we might have a better grasp on it. And yet, at the places where we could maybe bring that forward, because we have the belief it's a man's world, or, you know, somebody has said to us, well, you're going to cry at this meeting. Yeah, I'm crying because I'm pissed. I'm not crying because I want you to take care of me, that kind of thing. So, emotions, forgiveness, the tender side, the feminine side, we almost feel guilty for having it, right?
Yes. Yes. And the feminine side in itself is not terrible. It's actually a really
No.
good thing. But men feel it too. I will say this. I think men also have having, as you know, as a coach, I tend to work with men rather than women, and
Yeah.
I have a particular reason for working with men. And one of the things I discovered is men aren't able to effectively work with women because of that issue of what are they letting go of or what are they sacrificing by showing a caring or nurturing or feminine side to themselves.
Yeah. 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 And it comes back to we all struggle with the same issue, but from different perspectives, right?
Correct. Yeah.
They have a hard time forgiving themselves. They inherited the world that they're either maintaining or stepping aside and creating something new, or thinking, I mean, they were all indoctrinated like us. This is the way it is, you know. So
Sure. It,
I'm going to soldier on and compete and step on people to get where I want. If that's the case, not everybody does it, but, yeah,
they're taught from a very early age, don't cry, don't show your emotions, don't say what you think, it's wrong. So by the time they arrive in the executive or business world, these are habits that have been taken on for a very long time, and women have the same worldview. You're
yeah,
emotional, you say too much, don't talk out of turn.
yeah,
So when they meet in the workplace, we're all coming from a different perspective of what is appropriate behavior.
yeah,
And then we wonder why relationships and connectivity doesn't occur.
yeah,
And forgiveness is a beautiful way to start because it's a great practice in mindfulness of the present. You
yeah,
don't need to bring in yesterday's troubles. You don't need to make tomorrow. So let's talk about today and let's look at today and what gets to happen. And I'd love to see that become more and more a practice in workplaces, and
yeah,
not the forgiveness like forgive and forget, but actually practicing that open space that we can all work together if we give ourselves the opportunity.
yeah. You mentioned a practice. Do you have a particular practice that you use when you find you want to forgive, where you're struggling with somebody or conflict, injury perceived?
I have several now.
Hmm. Hmm.
I started off with a Hippopotamu Prayer, which is the four-line prayer. I am currently studying A Course in Miracles, and I know you're somewhat familiar with it. And they have lessons every day
Yeah,
to practice, and some of them are so incredibly beautiful. It's mind blowing where they shift your perception. The other thing that I've just discovered that someone forwarded to me, I love the way things show up when they're supposed to, and it's called the Gateway Experience from the Monroe Institute. And I don't know if you've heard of it,
I have
but
not.
it's teaching the brain to actually sync in the hemispheres. In other words, instead of one side working, it's actually training you how to get both sides working. And it's phenomenal because it's meditation, it's energy work, it's quantum physics, and it's all sort of packaged into one. And that is now really showing up, as I'm practicing it, sort of things are really showing up that I didn't see before. They're now showing up. So my practices grow as I develop, is the best
Yeah.
way to answer that question.
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard you say you get a bigger perspective, a bigger worldview, instead of sometimes I get very attached to my one specific thing that I don't like that's right in front of my face and that I think I was injured by or that should be different. Yeah. So letting go, I think, right, is a part of it too.
Actually, the biggest one was starting. It was saying to myself, "I'm willing to be wrong."
Yeah. That's a big one.
And that's a big one. And that's a huge one for me. That's a huge one, as you well know. And it came from the transformational work that we've been doing, for the
Yeah.
last couple of years. And one of them is the Be Right conversation, which
Yeah.
our audience may not know about, but there's a conversation about being right, and nobody else is going to come in and interfere with it. And I thought, what if I turned that upside down and sort of started from the place I'm willing to be wrong? It changed the whole conversation.
Yes. Yes. I'm willing to be wrong about how I have it, what their motives were, what their intention was, their come from, because
Yeah,
I have my own set of perceptions, right? So
right.
you touched on it earlier that if life is a mirror, who do I really want to forgive, right?
Yes.
And
It,
my own perceptions, my own limiting beliefs about a situation, or my own lack of courage to even say to somebody, "Is that what you meant?"
correct again.
Yeah,
And that willing to be wrong opens the door. You see, the way I have it is, when I'm willing to be wrong, it means I'm not standing in that locked position of being right. Because when I'm in
yeah,
being right, I'm locked. There's no way I can drop the judgment, no way I can change my perception. But if I'm willing to be wrong and I can see all the angles in that bigger worldview, then wouldn't it be great to be right about it too? So it was like, wow, look at that, look at that
yeah,
road, look at that way that I can open it up.
yeah,
And it's amazing when I say that to people, they laugh because
yeah.
they know who I am. And my daughter even said, she said, I'm speechless. But look at what it does. Look at
Yeah,
how it affects people just on on that level. And it's allowed me to be not passive aggressive anymore. It's
right.
actually I'm no longer passive aggressive because I'm no longer defending that position.
Yeah,
So the forgiveness is right there. I've forgiven myself in that space.
yeah.
What do you think about willing to be wrong?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because my worldview comes from my perceptions, and I'm seeing that more and more. I perceive something, and like you mentioned earlier, probably based on an experience I had in the past that has maybe nothing even to do with the situation I'm in. Fact, the more I react, the more it's probably from something I really reacted to in the past and I'm hanging on to it. And
Correct.
that was eye opening for me to start to recognize my overreactions are a place for me to look.
Well, for me, one of the lessons in Course in Miracles is I'm not upset for the reasons I think I am.
Yes.
And that one just blew my mind, every time I see it, every time I look at it, because it allows me as a coach to really dig in. Because
Yeah.
with that understanding, when people, as you know, as a coach yourself, when people start to talk about themselves and tell stories, um, I'm able to look past it and ask the real question. So, what are you really angry about?
Yeah.
And that's when, it'll all open up. But it's just like you said, we hold that emotion and charge it with energy and go, this person did this and this person did that. And you're like, no, they didn't. You're doing it.
Yeah, and add the drama. Add the
Yes.
drama. I was so dramatic. Maybe not expressively outward, but inside me, it's like, did you hear that tone of voice that person talked to you in? Who do they think they are? A little. When you really listen to your own thinking, it's entertaining sometimes.
It's extremely entertaining. And yes, you're right. You just reminded. I don't. I think now I'm sort of like getting further on this journey. I have a practice now of sort of like when I go to the grocery store, I'll say, "Thank you for coming to work today." That's one of my practices for the cashier or whoever's serving me. And I started it as part of that practice for forgiveness, purely because I wanted for the universe to that gratefulness, that gratitude. Yeah. Thank you for coming to work today. Without you here, I wouldn't be able to buy my groceries, or I wouldn't be able to get gas, or whatever it is. And I think that's part of the practice of forgiveness is also gratitude, understanding what we're offering back into the world. It's not taking from, it's offering to the world.
Very
and
good
that give forth bit that you mentioned earlier is about that. It's what are you giving forth? Are you taking or are you offering? Yeah. And that's another word that I changed. Instead of contribution or giving, I went to offer because I was challenged by that word. What do I offer the world? I was at because giving and contribution, we all know, you can give away money, but when you say offer, it's like, just offer me. And I asked someone who I know well, and she immediately replied, love. And it astonished me. She didn't even hesitate with it.
Yeah.
I had a problem. I couldn't answer it. It's like, how can you say that so easily? So to me, forgiveness is that it's offering gratitude and giving forth what we are back into the space and not, the offensiveness.
And letting people be human.
Yes. Yeah. Think about how that would change the business world if we sort of went with that practice.
Yeah.
Acknowledged everybody in the morning. Good morning. Thank you for coming to work today. We appreciate you being here as an employee. I would have loved to have heard that every day,
Me too.
When I was called in for overtime or, and doing things that were so difficult for me, yet I showed up for work.
Yeah.
Or at the end of the day, good job. Thank you very much for showing up.
Yeah.
What a practice.
Instead of the worldview, I got to watch you and make sure you're performing correctly, that you're not dropping the ball. Mind your bobber instead of my own. Yeah.
It would be great if we could offer that to bosses, just as a program. How you can change the work environment, what it would mean. It may seem uncomfortable in the beginning, if you think about it, but if you get into the practice of it, thank you for showing up for work today, and at the end of the day, thank you, good job, nice, people will go home refreshed, rather than depleted. Just something that we're talking about, forgiveness and the spectrum.
So as we start to wrap up, what tips do you have for the audience on if they think, I can relate, I've had stubborn areas of my life that I've refused to let go. Where is a good place to start, maybe?
A good place to start is coaching, actually. Mm-hmm. You and I both know we've experienced coaching, and finding a good coach who will open up your emotional, transformational work. There are a lot of good companies out there now, like Redesign, 10 Life. They're great places to start. I mean, you can go and do just part one, and that's enough. There's fabulous reading material out there. Course in Miracles is hard if you've never come across it or read it. But there's books like Marianne Williamson, A Return to Love. There are even Gary Renard, he's got some good books about it. Start reading the books. Start being curious about maybe there is something that could work better for you. And that's where I'm at. I'm always looking for that next book, that next thing. The book that really got me lately is Journey of Souls, which is talking about, souls and where they come from, where they go to. It's a bit out there, but it's okay. Gary Renard I loved. He's easy, quick, dirty, well, down and dirty as far as getting the concepts.
Yeah, wonderful. Do you have any follow-up comments, Elizabeth?
No, I enjoyed it as usual. We had a great conversation as usual.
We did. Where can our audience find you?
They can find me at elizabethblinnis.com. They can find me on Facebook under Elizabeth Blinnis. I don't have any courses that I'm running, but if you want to get in touch with me, Vicky can refer you. My internet is, or my email is elizabethblinnis@gmail. And trust me, there's only one out there in the world. That's me. So if you don't remember anything else, just remember my name, Elizabeth Blinnis.
Yeah. And I know there's only one you. Yeah. And I will post that information in our on Facebook and on our material marketings.
Thank you.
And for my audience, as I say goodbye, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. You can find me at vickydon.com and at vickydoncoach on Facebook. And remember, you create your beautiful life one step at a time. See you next time.